Hey Savvy people, it's Savvy Nick here, and today we'll be going through how to install Void Linux. We'll first download it, then I'll explain how to flash it onto a disk, we'll boot that disk, and finally run through how to install it on an empty storage space of your choice. If you're new and stopping by to watch an install today, please take a moment to subscribe below and hit the notification bell for more installs. I'm here on the Void Linux website where we are going to go ahead and find a download image. So let's go ahead to the download section, and then there's quite a bit of information here because Void Linux is available for many different types of architectures, as well as supplies many different desktop environments. As you can see here, there's a list of them: Enlightenment, Cinnamon, LXDE, LXQT, Mate, and XFCE. So we'll be able to select one of those flavors of desktop environment for our download. If you don't know which one you want, go ahead and do a little bit of research and figure out what desktop environment suits you the best. And we'll actually go to this link here, which is their mirrors. So let's go ahead and click on that. And as you can see here, we have plenty of different images available to us. And what we're interested in is the x86 64-bit architecture. So this is for 64-bit architectures here. You can see that by the 64 written in the name here. So you got the x86_64. That means it's for a 64-bit architecture. So we want to select one of these ISO files. So the difference is they're actually built on the same date, but we have different desktop environments. So go ahead and select the one that you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and download the XFCE ISO for myself. So I'm just going to click on it, and then my download will begin. Now that I've downloaded the ISO, I'm going to launch the Balena Etcher app in order to flash the image onto a USB, CD, or DVD of my choice. So let's go ahead and launch it. Just type in Balena and launch the application. Give it a moment here. Balena Etcher is an easy-to-use application available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I'll go ahead and put a link in the description below if you want to download the application. You can also use any other application that can create a bootable disk, such as UNetBootin or Rufus. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and select the image that we just got done downloading. So as you can see here, I have Void, the live version of the image. It's an x86 64-bit architecture, and then the release date, and the XFCE desktop environment. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and hit open. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put in my USB, and it will automatically populate for me. Now, if you have more than one USB, CD, or DVD, you can go ahead and hit the change button and select the proper USB, CD, or DVD that you want to go ahead and put the live Void Linux image onto. Make sure you select the proper one because all the contents of the USB, CD, or DVD will be erased in the process of flashing. So once you have selected your proper disk, go ahead and hit continue. Finally, you'll hit flash, and then you'll have to give it administrative privileges in order to go ahead with the process. After you flash the disk, you'll take it over to a computer or server where you want to install Void Linux on and then insert it. After that, you'll have to boot into your BIOS in order to change the order around and select the newly created bootable disk to be the first to boot. This is usually done by finding the correct key to boot into your BIOS for your particular computer. It's usually one of the F keys, like F2 or F10. And then finding a tab usually called boot order and exchanging the order so that the bootable disk is first to boot. After you have that set up, you will save and exit out of your BIOS, and you should see a screen similar to this if you did everything correctly. If you went ahead and made it this far, please hit the like button, it really does help me out. Alright, and if you see the screen, you've successfully made it to the install portion. We have two options here. Yours might have already loaded into the live image because it does time out automatically by itself, selecting the first option, which is the option that we want to select. It looks as if Void Linux also has the option of loading Void into RAM, which makes it extremely fast with this option, but what we want to do is go ahead and install it on a local storage space that's completely empty. So let's go ahead and select this first option. Give it a few moments here. So while loading in, I did get this error here. I'm not sure what this is, but I'm just going to go ahead and close out, not really worried about it. And what I want to do, since Void Linux is a little unique, it has an older installer included with it. So what we're going to have to do is launch a terminal in order to launch our Void Linux installer. So let me just make the view a little bigger here, just so you can see what I'm typing in. That should be plenty big. So what we want to do is log in as the super user, so we can use that. So we can do that by typing in su space root, and the default password for Void Linux Live is void Linux. So go ahead and type that in, and now if I do who am I can see that I'm root. So that's great. The next command we want to do is void-installer. So if you went ahead and downloaded the ISO without a desktop environment, you'll of course get a terminal. You can still follow along because the steps will be the same. So let's go ahead and press enter. And as you can see here, it's welcomed us to the Void Linux installation. We're going to go ahead and press enter to hit OK. And then the first thing we're going to set up is our keyboard layout. So let's go ahead and set a system keyboard. Go ahead and select whatever one works for you, but mine's the US standard keyboard, so I'm just going to go ahead and go down to US. And just a hint, if you go ahead and just type the first letter of whatever you're looking for, it will take you down at least to that section of letters. So if you type in U, it'll take you to the very first entry with a U. I'm going to go ahead and select US. Next is the network setup. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my network. It says it did detect a Ethernet adapter here as well as a MAC address, which is great. You won't necessarily need an internet connection for this install, but it is nice to go ahead and set this up. So I'm going to go ahead and select my first and only adapter here and just hit OK. Next, it's asking me if I want to set up DHCP for my Ethernet adapter, and yes, I do. All this means is our network adapter will be set up so that it grabs an IP address from a router or some other device managing our network, which is fine by me. Otherwise, you're going to have to set up a static IP address, and I don't want to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. Give it a moment here, and it says my network is working properly, so great. I'm just going to press OK now. And the following is to set the source for the installation, which is from the CD, DVD, or USB that we have inserted currently. So I'm going to go ahead and put that I want it to grab from the local live image that we have. So you can see it says packages from the ISO image that we're currently on. You can also do a network install, but it will definitely require a network connection. So since we already have the ISO image, might as well do it local and hit OK there. Next is the host name. So let's set up a host name, name it whatever you want. This is what the machine will be known as and will be seen as with other devices. So I'm just going to type in SavvyNick and hit OK for me. And following that, we can set up a locale. So let's press enter. And again, I'm going to search for my English format. If I just type in E, that'll take me down to the ENs, and then I have an EN, US, the UTF-8. As you can see, it's English, United States of America, so that works great for me. I'm going to go ahead and select that, select whatever one that you use, and then hit OK. Next is the time zone, so I'm going to go ahead and set a system time zone. I'm going to go down to the Americas, and I'm going to find a place close to me. So today, Argentina Salta is just fine for me, so I'm going to go ahead and press enter on that. Following that, we'll be setting up a root password. Let's go ahead and press enter, and then type in a password that you want to use for a root. After that, you're going to be asked to confirm the password, so go ahead and do that and press enter. Next, we have the user account to set up, and this is the primary user of the system. So this is what you'll be logging in with to access your desktop. So let's go ahead and set this up. By default, it's set to void. I'm going to go ahead and type in SavvyNick instead for myself, as well as the username SavvyNick. After that, I'm asked for a password for SavvyNick and then a confirmation for the password. So after I'm done with that, we'll be assigning group membership roles for the new user we're creating. And the default is fine for me. As you can see here, there are some things already selected for us. So if you do want to give your user different privileges, you can scroll through these and just press the space button in order to select whatever you want. But like I said, the default's fine for me. You can always add in different permissions with your root user that you've set up anyway once you have the system installed. So I'm going to go ahead and just press OK here. Next, we're going to be asked about the bootloader. So I'm going to go ahead and set where to install the bootloader. As you can see here, I only have one disk, dev SDA, size 32 gigabytes, and that's the one I'm going to be selecting. Make sure you select the proper disk if you have more than one mounted to your computer, because you don't want to install or overwrite a bootloader that already exists on a different storage device. I do suggest using a storage device that is completely empty, or one that you don't care about losing all the contents on, because through this installer you will be erasing all the contents of whatever disk that you are selecting. So once you've confirmed you've selected the proper disk, go ahead and press OK. And it asks you, do you want to use the graphical terminal for the bootloader? Yes, why not for me? Following that is where it gets a little tricky. We'll have to partition our disks, so let's go ahead and do this. So here you can see the disk selected is dev.sda. That's the only one for me. Of course, you might have more than this if you have multiple disks that are mounted to your system. Make sure again to select the proper one. Whichever one that we partition will be completely erased and unrecoverable after we are finished with this. So let's go ahead and press enter. Here you can go ahead and read through about the differences. You can either set up an MBR or GPT partition table. If you are using an EFI BIOS system, you'll want to make an extra partition that's mounted to boot EFI, as it says in here. Make sure to read through this and make sure to understand whether you have legacy BIOS or EFI BIOS, because there are two different setups here. I personally have EFI BIOS here, so I'm going to set it up for that. Again, this is important to read and understand. Make sure you do research this if you have any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. As you see here, I can select the label type. So like I mentioned, I need the GPT since I have an EFI BIOS. And if you are of the legacy BIOS, you might need the DOS partition. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I go ahead and press enter. And then I can see here all my free space available. As you can see on the top, you can see the size is 32 gigabytes. And then down at the bottom, it kind of defines the sectors for you. So I have complete free space right now, starting from the 2048 sector going to this 67 some odd number at the end. Of course, it says the size is 32 gigs. So what I'm going to do is, out of this free space, I'm going to go ahead and create 3 new partitions for my system. So I'm going to go ahead and press new. The first partition is going to be my EFI partition. So I'm going to backspace out of here. I don't want to use the full 32 gigs or I won't have any more available for myself. At the bottom, you can see that you have capital M, capital G, and capital T for various different shortcuts and sizes. What I'm going to use is 512 megabytes for my EFI partition. So all I have to do is type in 512, and with the capital M, I believe you can actually partition up to 2 gigabytes for your EFI partition, but I don't see the point in that. Let's keep it small. So 512 megabytes for me should be just fine. I'm going to go ahead and press enter now. And as you can see up top, we've developed a new device called dev.sda1. So the parent is SDA, or the entire disk that we're working with, and SDA1 is a partition inside that overall disk that is now 512 megabytes and is where our EFI partition is going to go. So I'm going to keep using this free space, and I'm going to go ahead and select new again. And it says I have 31.5 gigs available, but I want to go ahead and cut this down. I'm going to take 2 gigs off of this, so I want to use 29.5 gigs, and this is going to be for my Linux root file partition. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is basically your storage for the entire Linux system. And the reason I took 2 gigs off is because I want to save that for a swap partition here that I'm going to create next. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter, and then finally go down and select new again and use the remaining 2 gigs for my final partition. And as you can see on the far right hand side, it says Linux file system. So all of these are of type Linux file system, which is not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, on the SDA1, I'm going to change the type. So we'll select type, and then we can go up to the EFI system partition type. Remember, if you do have legacy BIOS, you'll want the MBR partition scheme, but I'll leave that to you. And there's also other videos out there that you can watch in order to set up a legacy BIOS system. So I'm going to go ahead and select the EFI system, and following that, I'm going to go scroll down one, and the Linux file system is actually just fine for SDA2, so I'm going to keep it that. And finally, with SDA3, I'm going to go ahead and change the type again. And this one is going to be of Linux swap partition type. So I'm going to press enter here. And now we have these 3 partitions. So at this point, everything is going to be erased on the disk, and we are restructuring how the disk works. So you'll again want to make sure that the storage device has nothing on it or doesn't need any of the data currently on it. And then I'm going to go ahead and write my changes. After we hit write, we'll be asked to type in yes to confirm we want to write the changes. Make sure you just type in YES. Don't capitalize anything. Don't just put in Y. It will not write correctly. It has to be in this format. So YES, and then press enter. You'll get a confirmation at the very bottom in blue that says the partition table has been altered, meaning it has been changed. And once this happens, you'll go ahead and just quit out of this partitioning tool. Next, we're left to set some flags on the file systems. So let's go ahead and configure the file systems. Press enter. The first file system we have is the SDA one, which was the partition of the UEFI system. Let's go ahead and press enter. We'll want to use the vFAT for this one, the FAT32, and hit OK. And then it's asking us, where do we want to mount this? Well, it's going to be in /boot/EFI, and then press enter. It says, do you want to create a new file system on dev SDA1? Yes, we do. Next is the SDA2. We're going to go ahead and press enter on this. Go down to ext4, the Linux ext4 journal. File system will work great for me. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK. And then it says specify a mount point. We just want to put 1/ in and hit enter. And do we want to create a new file system? Yes, that's why we're doing this. And finally, go down to the very bottom, the SDA3. We said we wanted to create swap with this one, so we'll have to enable the swap flag. Let's go ahead and press enter on Linux swap. And again, create the new file system. After we're done with all 3, we'll go ahead and scroll over to the done and press enter. Now that we have our file systems selected and the disk's partition, we'll go ahead and run the installer. So let's go ahead to install and press OK. Here we are getting one last confirmation in red that it will completely destroy any and all data in order to replace the current data on the storage disk with the Void Linux install. So I'm going to go ahead and press yes because I am confident that this is all good. And now it's beginning to install Void Linux. So Void Linux is an independent distribution, meaning their package manager and build system are completely written from scratch. As mentioned on their website, they follow a rolling release model, keeping you at the cutting edge of development. And they also supply an image for many different architectures, so you can use Void Linux across many different devices. Give it a few moments here. Alright, and if you've made it to here, it looks like the install has been successful, and it's asking us if we want to reboot the system. And while you're rebooting, you'll want to make sure to go ahead and remove any installation media that you may have in your computer so you don't boot back into the installer or the live image of the system. Otherwise, you'll have to reboot once more and take out the media in order to get to your newly installed system. So once we're ready, we can go ahead and press yes to restart. Give it a few moments here. And once the system's loaded, it's asking you if you want to log in. So you can see that the user that we created during the install is here. So Savvy Nick. I'm going to go ahead and put my password in and press enter. And now we're loaded into our new desktop environment for Void Linux, the XFCE one. I'm getting a little error here, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to close out for now. If you got this far, congratulations, you've successfully installed Void Linux on your computer. Let's go ahead and take a look around real quick. And on the top left-hand side, you can run your applications from here. You have subcategories available to you, as well as to run a program, run the terminal emulator, get to the file manager, read mail, browse the web, and some other stuff here. On the right-hand side, you can see that we have the current user logged in, which if you select, you can shut down, lock, and log out. And then you have the current date time, as well as any notifications that are coming in. The current battery power, which I'm not so sure that I have any battery because I'm on a desktop computer. But anyways, you can get to your power management settings from here. And then you have the current wired connection or wireless connection. Here you can select between different workspaces if you want to use more than one. At the bottom, we have a mini dock that you can use as well. There's some launchers here that currently have no items in them. On the left-hand side, you can restore any minimized windows or minimize all windows that are currently on the desktop. And on the right-hand side, you can load just some folders, and it's really just a quick shortcuts. So if I open folder, it'll open the file manager up, and then I can get through my file system like this. So that's really it. I hope you enjoyed this installation tutorial of Void Linux. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please post them in the comments section below. Also, make sure to subscribe for future videos and make sure to like the video. Thanks for watching.